Should the government be allowed to issue non-binary birth certificates? That's the question. This is Redeeming Life Q&A. I'm Pastor Brian, and this is where I do my best to answer the questions that you are asking. Moment of confession, I had to Google non-binary birth certificate, kind of get myself up to speed, and it's part of this argument about gender and gender identity and sex. And so the idea is that there's a group of people arguing that the state or the government or a hospital should not be allowed to put male or female on a birth certificate, with the idea that the child that was born should be able to determine sex and gender at a later date. It's all debatable. It's what we're seeing play out politically right now. But actually, this isn't the question. The question is, what should the government be allowed to do? Should they be allowed to issue these kinds of birth certificates? And the conversation went on a little bit further. The person asking said, because I want my child to have that on the birth certificate, and what do we do with all this? And so I just want to think about this a little bit. The Pharisees came to Jesus, trying to trap him. They asked if it's lawful, biblically lawful under the Old Covenant, is it lawful to give Caesar or render taxes to Caesar? Because doing so would be maybe not honoring God in some way. Jesus says, hey, bring me a coin. He sees Caesar's picture on it. And Jesus' answer was, render or give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God's. And the idea being that the state is placed over you, and they have certain control and authority, and you have to give certain things to them, such as taxes, but you also have to render or give to God what is God's. And so Jesus sort of shows us that certainly God first, but if it's not in violation of God's laws, then you need to submit to your government as well. We see that elsewhere in the Bible. That might be what's going on here in some ways. The Bible makes it very clear that God identifies gender. God identifies sex. He created them, male and female. Whether the state recognizes that or not isn't the same thing. In fact, it's not the state's job to identify what that is when God has already done that. Let me frame it a little bit differently. I do wedding ceremonies. You have two believers in Jesus Christ. They're being married before God and before witnesses. They've made a covenant to one another. At what point are they married? Are they married when that happens? Or are they married when I sign the state marriage certificate? Here's the problem. I don't sign state marriage certificates. I'm not an agent or a representative of the state when it comes to marriage. I represent God. I'm an ambassador of Jesus Christ. And therefore, people are married before God, and they have the choice. If they would like the state to recognize the marriage that God has ordained, they can then go down to the courthouse. They can stand before a judge and say, we are married. The judge gives them a state certificate, because it's the state's job, I believe, to maybe recognize the marriages that God has performed. Now, they don't have to, but it's God's job to marry souls, to bring them together in covenant, to define what marriage is, and to do that. And so there are some that will go, oh, well, you're not married until you have a state marriage certificate. The state does not make that good before the eyes of God. God makes that good before the eyes of God. The same is true of the gender of a child who is born. And so whether the state issues birth certificates or not is not even the point. Whether they put something on the birth certificate or not, that doesn't change anything. The state is not higher than God. And so, if you don't even have a birth certificate, I guess so be it. But here's the thing. In our country, we are an active part of our government. In the United States, you get to vote for representatives. You get to write your representatives and reach out to them and talk to your mayors and governors and president. And I would encourage that you do. You get to have some say. I would encourage that you share your convictions, share the gospel, share what the Bible says. Let them know how you feel about this. But at the end of the day, whether the state recognizes the gender of your child or not is really irrelevant, because it is for God to define, to declare, to choose. And so as Christians, we're going to hold on to that. We're going to trust that the Lord has done what the Lord's going to do. And if the state's going to do crazy things, I guess God has appointed that over us. And they can do that. And until it puts us at odds with God, when following the laws of the state will put us in violation of what God has for us, then we have a problem. But if the state just wants to do whatever, I guess so be it. Hey, if you have questions, you can reach out to us. You can text this phone. This is a church phone. There's not any addresses or numbers on it. The number is 385-368-6665. and we'd be happy to try to take a stab at the question you have asked, or you can reach out in the comments, or if you know us, just let us know. We'd love to try to answer your questions.